There is an awful lot to unpack from yesterday's shooting, and joining us tonight to discuss the ramifications is TJ Smith. He's a former Anne Arundel County police commander and former chief spokesperson for Baltimore Police Department. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Smith. First of all, we've all been watching the different angles of what happened yesterday in Minneapolis. Tell us what you saw and if you believe the officer's life was in danger.
Yeah, you know, the video is obviously heartbreaking. You don't want any police or federal authorities to want to kill anyone. But when you see the video and a lot of the discourse that we see online, you saw the wheels turn. In that heat of the moment, the police aren't looking at that. How I describe this is I do radio now full time here in Baltimore, and I describe this to the audience today as lawful but awful. Doesn't mean that it's a situation that there should not be any layers of accountability. However, as we look at this situation, I think you can talk to 100 people, 100 police officers, and you might get 100 different answers as to how they would have handled it. But it's one of those scenarios where you can get skilled law enforcement officers say, I would have gotten out of the way. But I think some of the concern that comes in is that local police officers are the ones that are going to have to deal with the aftermath of events like this. And we're hearing about the breaking news out of Portland, where 2 more individuals were shot by federal authorities. And right here in Maryland, in Glen Burnie, just a month ago, we saw federal authorities shoot someone, but they survived. This one's a bit different because, of course, this person died. But at the same time, I think people have to take a step back, take a breath, and recognize the fact that everyone in this scenario has a duty and responsibility to de-escalate the situation so it doesn't rise to an occasion like this.
So well put. Vice President J.D. Vance, we heard earlier today, called this tragedy of the driver's own making. But I'm curious what you make of the tactics that the officers employed before the shooting.
No, I mean, I think that the federal government officials have been saying way too much so soon without getting all of the information. Yes, you see all of the videos that we've seen, and there's some question about what happened after she was shot. We heard a physician in the background trying to render aid. So that'll be part of an investigation. And all of these police departments around the country have worked hard to try to bridge the gap between the community and law enforcement. And some of what you described earlier leading into this segment are part of the reason for that. And there's been so much that's happened over the last several years that's been good in communities. They don't need setbacks from federal officers who are kind of there for a temporary moment and then they're going to leave. So when you look at this situation, let the investigation play out. Find out what happened in the beginning, before the videos started rolling. Find out what happened after the fact and look at all of that. But again, I'm not downplaying any of what occurred because, again, I do think the de-escalation from even the officers in this case could have saved this woman's life. And people will say, well, he could have moved out of the way. But we also have to look at the fact that it was a vehicle that could have been going in the direction of a police officer. And I say the lawful but awful because you don't have to like what you saw, and you can look at it and say it could have been handled differently. However, in this situation, I think when it's all said and done, they're going to find this as a justified shooting based on what I'm seeing from the video, because again, the officer could have been shot, could have been run over. And again, was that the intent of the driver? Likely not. I think we all can maybe agree that that wasn't her intent, but then you have to ask the question, why not just pull over and let them do whatever it is they're going to do? Or do you recognize that you're getting in the midst of law enforcement activity and that can cause additional problems and escalate things?
And as you well know, the FBI is taking over this investigation of the incident. Is that unusual to cut out the local officers, state officials too, from investigating something that happened in their city and state? And are those departments legally required to comply?
No, it's the FBI. I'm not surprised that they're handling this investigation. Again, there are examples in local jurisdictions where federal law enforcement fired shots or maybe even killed people, and the local officials did a joint investigation. This should be a joint investigation. What we heard from Governor Tim Walz in Minnesota was that they aren't getting information from the federal government. That is not at all how this should happen. And quite frankly, because of the politics involved on the side of the state of Minnesota and the federal government, this probably needs to be deconflicted to someone else other than the officials in Minnesota or the federal government at this point. I don't know how we do that, but something like that probably needs to happen to give a fair investigation to make sure that there is justice that's doled out for the person who died and her family and the officer so that it's looked at in a fair way.
TJ Smith, we want to thank you for your insights and perspective this evening. And thanks for taking time with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.